So now we are more of a kind of a societal change agent, and we are working now, for example, on circular economy, on human-driven data economy, on lifelong learning, etc. I work in foresight, so my job is to look into futures and to think about what might change, what kind of tensions there are, what kind of images of future we have. Today I'm going to talk about the future of expert work. I was involved in a couple of projects on the future work, which were a background project for the last government's report on the future, which was on the future work. So I'll be drawing on that and also bringing some kind of recent additions to that work. So I asked you when you arrived to briefly discuss what kind of images do you have when you think about the future of work. And the reason I did this was that these kind of images do matter. It's not trivial what we think about futures. How many of you have heard about that robots will take over our jobs? Raise your hands. Oh, yeah. It's quite popular fable. Here are a couple of Der Spiegel covers from 1964 to 2017, describing how robots will take over our jobs. And the recent kind of story is that they will also take over the expert work or knowledge work. And this is not to say that automation hasn't happened, but we often tend to think about futures in a kind of an either-or way. So robots will take over all of our jobs. Well, we still have factory jobs. They are a bit different, but we do have them. And now the question is that what will future of expert work be? What are the new tasks? Can we shape them, etc.? So I'm going to start briefly with a couple of words about how we think about futures in general, and then go through megatrends to trends in the future of work. And then we'll have a brief break and a Q&A, and then I'll continue with skills needed and with organizing work, and then about some more surprising things and ways to shape the future. The reason we're doing this is because of the live stream. Hello to live stream also, so it's easier to have the Q&A in this two parts. All right, but be sure to write down the questions. So, how do we think about futures? There are basically three ways to approach futures. First is to think about kind of how to prepare for the future. The future, by definition, doesn't exist, so we can't kind of know about it empirically, but we can look at what kind of things are changing now. And what are perhaps the uncertainties now, and this is the kind of the typical megatrend work, this preparing for the future, looking at trends, etc. But because the future doesn't exist, we can shape what it will become, and this is very typical in vision work and strategy work. We are trying to influence the future. And the key questions there are, what can we do? What are the kind of the key points to influence futures? A very important question is also, when we're thinking about preferable futures, is that preferable for whom? Are the things we think that, okay, this might be the ideal future work, for example, is it ideal for everybody? Then there's a third part, or third mode of thinking about futures that's often a bit neglected, and which should be emphasized perhaps more, especially in this day and age. It's about focus on novelty and emergence. So we tend to look at the future with a very kind of a narrow view. We look at the future of our own domain or future of engineering work or my specific domain. We have kind of a limited set of images of the future. And then we are surprised that when something out of the ordinary in our mindset happens. So what is important here is to challenge our assumptions and to kind of think about what are we not questioning. For example, in the future, the robots will take over our job. What are the kind of key assumptions there? There's the assumption of efficiency above all else. Is this, will this hold? In what kind of worlds and futures will this hold? Is this something we want to be kind of a key driver in the future? So, so keeping these three in mind, the preparation is about megatrends, the planning is about visioning, and the novelty is about weak signals. And I'll get back to the visions and weak signals in a bit, but let's start with the global picture. So here's the kind of the world in 6 megatrends. Well, actually the world in 3 and the Nordic countries in other 3 megatrends. So what is the big picture? As a kind of futures researcher, I always want to start with the global image of the future. The key megatrends are sustainability crisis. So you've probably heard about climate change, biodiversity loss, resource scarcity, the trash problem, etc. We are kind of facing increasingly difficult crisis in our way of life. We are consuming way more than we should be. This means that we should probably do something. And coming back to the future of work, this will mean that there will be probably quite a lot of changes to the future of work. We should be able to agree on things on a global level in a time where global tensions have been on the rise. The world is multipolar or polynodal was the new word that I heard, that things are very kind of connected and the power of kind of the old players is diminishing. We still have global institutions, and we still have been able to agree on things on a global level. So there's a glimmer of hope there also. Then a third thing about technology. Technology is developing fast, but we also apply it quite fast. It becomes part of our everyday life quite fast. If we think about, for example, smartphones, if I would have said in, well, I don't know, 15 years ago that you almost everyone would have a device that links to satellites and collects data from another continent just to know where the nearest cafe is, people would have thought that this is so totally implausible. But now we don't really think about it. So it becomes a part of our everyday life, and now we have things like social media addiction. We have things like platform economy and many kind of platform companies, which would be really hard to imagine without a smartphone. Think about Uber in a time where the computers were quite large. So technology is a key driver in our society and also in our work. So what does this mean for Nordic countries? Well, there's the future of work, or the riddle of work and income. So, well, I'll get back to that. But the key question is what is work in the future, and where do we get our income? Also, in the Nordic countries, the representative democracy is facing challenges. So the question is, the discussion is polarizing. We are facing difficulties in deciding on kind of the key radical changes that we should be making in terms of ecological crisis, or in terms of our structures in regarding work and income. And finally, the economy at a crossroad. We are kind of facing a decision on what kind of economy do we want to have in the future. Do we want to continue in this kind of a linear consumption-based economy, or can we make a shift towards more sustainable circular economy? Think about what are the goals. Is economic growth the goal? Is well-being the goal? Or is indeed now the improvement of environmental status the goal, and societal well-being a boundary condition? Well, now we think of environment more of a kind of a boundary condition, that we can grow our economy and produce well-being if it's not at the expense of environment, which it now is. So, if we now zoom to the actual topic, so the future of work, so I mentioned the previous Finnish government did this government report on the future. It's in two parts. The part one is about what changes, and part two is about what should be done. So the part one lists 5 key kind of changes. First is about the contents and practices of work. So how is work changing? What are the work tasks in the future? How will we work? What are the kind of our tools? The second thing is about organizing work. Who is an employer? Who is an employee? The whole question about platform economy is key here. Then there's the question of skills. If work is changing, what are the needed skills in the future? What should we learn? And here there's also the idea of paradigm shift towards lifelong learning now for real. So making learning kind of continuous. Then there's the whole question of livelihood and income. If work changes, if it becomes more uncertain, what are the kind of the social welfare structures that we need? So the whole question about, for example, the basic income is related to this. And finally, a kind of a more philosophical question is the kind of the definition of work and social importance of work. Now we think, now work is key part of our identity. We kind of describe ourselves through our work in many cases. But if work is changing and if it's becoming more kind of network and fluid and uncertain, etc., what will it mean for our identity? Well, what will it mean for our kind of definition or understanding of work? So today I'm going to focus on the contents, organizing, and skills. You can ask about the other two as well. I'm not sure if I can answer, but you can at least ask. So I'm going to go now to the contents of the work, and I have 2 kind of major drivers of change that will affect what we do, what is work in the future. First is the ecological crisis, and the second is technology. So, or we could think about not the crisis, but ecological reconstruction or rebuilding, which is basically it's also a question of why we work. So just to give a kind of a status quo, where are we now? We are in a situation where we are facing key ecological challenges and kind of throwing away a lot of things, doing things very inefficiently. So we are using our materials only one and then throwing them away. We waste 1/3 of the food. We waste kind of the agricultural nutrients, so phosphorus and nitrogen. We have an infrastructure which is basically not in use for most of the time. And then we have climate change. So when the IPCC report came a year ago, it said that, okay, we have a remaining carbon budget of 420 gigatons. We were currently then consuming 42 gigatons. It has gone up. And now I would say that our kind of carbon budget is gone in 8 years. So if we want to keep under 1.5 degrees, and why do we want to keep under 1.5 degrees? To prevent catastrophical kind of runaway consequences. So if we want to keep the planet habitable, we want to keep under 1.5 or 2 degrees. And here's a kind of 66% probability. Would you board a plane which arrives at 66% probability? Well, this is the best we can do now. Here is our kind of scientific conclusion that we should probably do something. And we are doing something. We are responding to this. And there are quite a lot of opportunities also in this. One report that I came across was by the International Resource Panel, which said that actually globally, if we think about urbanization, if we kind of extrapolate on that trend, we need kind of over 60% of our infrastructure isn't yet built. So by 2050. So we think about this, we have a kind of a good opportunity to influence what the world will be in 2050. Will we build this using kind of our old systems, which are not good for the environment, or can we, at the same time as we are building this new infrastructure, can we move to more sustainable practices? Kind of need a rethinking of our economy, and here we are already seeing that actors just such as Financial Times are calling for a reset of capitalism, or World Economic Forum is saying that, okay, perhaps we should start thinking things differently. And how could we think things differently? We are now focusing on ecological footprint, so we are trying to mitigate the impacts of our actions. Perhaps we should be focusing also more on ecological handprint, so trying to improve the state of the environment. Moving from talking about sustainability to restorative or regenerative economy. And then we can think about, okay, what are then the jobs in a restorative, regenerative economy? We need to renew our natural ecosystems. There's a lot of work to be done on climate solutions, etc. So there's quite a lot of work that is then needed. So thinking about the kind of the way forward, we have been talking about sustainable development. We need renewable energy. We need clean tech bioeconomy. Digitalization has a role to play in kind of increasing the efficiency as well, and then we can think about circular economy. So that would be a very good thing to kind of bet on. We want to think about the expert work needs. How can companies move to a circular economy? So thinking about moving from linear economy where we just throw things away. In some cases, we are now in the recycling economy. We can get materials kind of recycled. But what we really want to do is to minimize waste altogether. Think about services instead of products. Think about lengthening the lifespan of products. Think about how to make things easy to maintain, etc. And here again, there are design jobs, there are jobs in maintenance, there are jobs in system design, there are jobs in thinking about the material flows, etc. All right. So think about, okay, well, what do the Finns think? Would this be a good idea? Yes, it would. So 87% think that, yeah, it's important to move to circular economy by 2025. So that's quite close. And we have the business models to do this. We have different solutions, so it's just a matter of doing it. Also, this links to climate change in that if you just focus on 4 materials, for steel, plastic, concrete, and aluminium, and can get them to kind of circulate in the economy instead of throwing them away, we can reduce 56% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So there's quite a lot of opportunities here as well. And this also requires us to think more systemically, so thinking about business ecosystems. So, for example, here's kind of a simple example of a city bike. So we need everybody to collaborate on this. So we need municipal decision makers. They think that, okay, we will support this. We need people who will repair this. We need urban planners to design the city for cyclists. We need inhabitants to actually use them. We need manufacturers to build this. This is just a kind of a simple example that there's a lot of actors that need to think differently and do things differently. All right. So the next part is about technology. It's about how we work. So if the previous was why we work and what we do, this is more about how we work and what we do. So if we just look at where technology is taking us, there was a good report, well, good in the eyes of future research at least, by the Finnish Committee for the Future called Societal Transformation. It's a 600-page report, but it's good for evening reading. Perhaps the first kind of around 20 pages are the key point. It's talking about regime change, which is driven by technology, and the rest is about the kind of the technologies that are developing, radical technologies, and which technologies are developing fast. But the key message, in my opinion, in this report is that we need to rethink the way we are doing things. So technology doesn't only enable us to do things more efficiently or keep doing the same thing more efficiently or better in some other way, but it kind of challenges our way of doing things. So we need to shift our mindset as well. Automation is one thing. So We can, of course, put our paper forms in a digital platform and do things the way we are used to, but that's kind of not the point of digitalization or automation in this regard. It requires a kind of a rethinking of the whole process. So there's a lot of new technologies enabling the automation of a lot of knowledge work, for example. There's also technologies such as 3D printing, etc., which allow us a different level of decentralization. Or then if you think about smart grids and solar panels, etc., it enables a decentralization of our energy system. This is, again, a kind of a different way to think about how we, for example, produce energy. There are new technologies driving towards more kind of virtuality, so we can work in either in a virtual reality or mixed reality, but also the kind of the basic telework, working from home, etc., is more accessible than ever. I think an interesting part of this is also how new technologies enable a large amount of people to collaborate together. So we can gather together on a platform and create content together or exchange information together or fund things together in a crowdfunding platform. Technology also increases our opportunities, our individual opportunities, responsibilities. If we want to take a kind of optimist view, it can be democratizing. We can use new technology to gain new skills. People who are blind can see with a smartphone, or mixed reality, augmented reality can kind of provide step-by-step instructions to do things. At the same time, our society is getting more and more vulnerable to different kind of threats by a small group of people, for example, who are flying a drone near a airport, and then the whole kind of airport is messed up. There's also an interesting part of these technologies which are moving us more towards closed systems. For example, in food, there are technologies such as we can grow our food in the basement, which is then lit by LEDs, etc., and have a kind of a totally closed system with closed water system, etc. All work is done by robots, etc. Or we can have kind of berry cells grown in this bioreactor that VTT has developed, which is also kind of a closed system compared to forest where we usually get our berries. So there's a part of that as well. And I say technology driven, these are all opportunities, and now the question is, do we want to kind of take these opportunities? Are these something we want? And how can we then influence them? Digitalization is another kind of key thing which is usually talked quite a lot of when thinking about the future work. A good question is that what is digitalization? What do we mean by it? I like the book by McAfee and Brynjolfsson, who are saying that basically it's about three things. It's about artificial intelligence, it's about platforms, and it's about crowds. So we have artificial intelligence enabling us to do different things, basically gathering a lot of data and finding patterns in that data and then making services based on that. We have platforms through which these services can be kind of applied, and platforms also gather a large amount of people to collaborate, and thus we get the kind of the third part, the crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, etc. And these are all things that are now kind of changing our work, our industry, etc. We can also think in more detail about kind of what are the new technologies and ways of doing things. We have Internet of Things and 5G, so our environments are getting more intelligent. Thus far, our kind of devices have become more intelligent, but now the kind of the trend is that soon our kind of walls and the environment might have a lot of sensors and be able to respond to different things and provide more kind of customized services to us. Also, digital technologies driving decentralization. Well, it's also driving centralization. We are talking a lot about platform monopolies, which is the kind of the dominant trend. But there are also platform cooperatives. So the same technology can be applied to kind of also decentralize power and decentralize wealth distribution. DAO is distributed autonomous organizations. So you can also build organizations using blockchains and smart contracts. Data amount is getting, we have more and more data. We know less and less what to do with it usually, but we still have big data. Well, we are figuring out what to do with all the data, and here I think an interesting trend is also thinking about Europe in terms of China and the USA. So in Europe we own our data. We don't know what to do with it yet, but we do own it, and we are at Sitra we are working on the use cases and standards and business models needed to enable this human-driven data economy, fair data economy. And then I think a crucial part is also social norms. I would say that when it comes to digitalization, we are still in the beginning and we are still learning how to behave in a digital environment. So think about internet trolls and think about social media addiction, etc. We're still kind of grappling with how do we use this technology. Hopefully we will learn at some point. All right, so what would these technologies mean for the future work? This is from the second part of the government report on the future, or its background report. They are talking about 3 modes of work as a kind of a very simplistic way to think about, or perhaps 3 modes of the tasks that we will have. We will have this more, let's say, algorithmic tasks. These are things that we will outsource to machines. So usually things that are repetitive, or things that there's a lot of data on, and also things that, well, they're not really things that human can kind of develop its humanity by doing it. So they're actually things that it's good to have a machine to do it. But then we have high touch and high tech work. So high touch means that work tasks where human connection is important. Of course, all of the care jobs are in this category, or tasks are in this category, but also customer service, things where there is an added value of meeting people face to face, or people meeting people and people not meeting machines. Then there's high-tech work, which is not just about new technology, but it's about messy problems. So things that there is not necessarily a lot of data on, things that are hard to kind of pinpoint that what is the actual goal in this task, things that are complex, where humans still excel in kind of creating the meaning in these kind of complex, messy environments. All right, so how am I doing with time? Oh, good. Now we have a 15-minute break, during which I would like you to discuss with the pair of, well, how do you think work will change in the future? Reflecting on these or some other things you have. Also write down your questions and we'll get back to them after the break. So we are now 20, well, let's have a 20-minute break, so we'll continue at 6. All right. Can I start with the discussion or start with grabbing more coffee or whatever you want? It's 6 o'clock. We are very punctual. So, do you have any or what questions and comments do you have? And please wait for the microphone so your question will also be heard by the stream. So, well, we'll gather about 3 questions. There's first here.
Hello. So there have been a lot of conversations about future, and people always discuss the technology, and only very briefly people discuss social norms, usually in relation with technology, that we will be more connected. But there is also other process which is going on in the world. It is that people are getting more freedom. So we don't live like our parents do. It's different how we build a family, how we have kids, how we build relationships, how we follow our life passions. So what would you say about this changing of social norms? That, for example, more people are singles, people have less kids, people have kids later, people choose their job based on passion, not based on money and all that non-technology stuff. Thank you.
Very good question. We'll gather 2 more questions. Any any more questions? I think there was one. Just
from the stream, there is one question.
Okay.
I can ask that one. This person would like to hear some expert insights on how typical engineer-driven B2B technical sales is expected to develop in the coming 5 to 10 years. With the huge amount of technical data and information that's available. So he's asking what will be the role of a future salesperson and what will be their main assets from the average.
All right, good. I'm not sure if I can answer. I'll try to say something. What more questions? Any more questions this time? Okay, well, we'll start with this. First about the social norms. So I think that's a very good point. We tend to think about world in terms of how technology will develop, and partly because technology is easier to think about. The social norms I mentioned about, for example, do we learn how to behave in digital environment? That's one open question. The other is especially in Finland, there is this kind of demographic division of people. We do have urbanization. People are getting older. We have increasing experience of inequality, and I think this is one of the key kind of tensions in the future, and how will we kind of deal with this? If you think about the job, kind of what would this mean for the future of work? Well, one thing it means that there will be tasks related to kind of decreasing the polarized discussion. There will be tasks related to taking diverse perspectives into account. Then if you think about more globally, Finland is pretty secularized country, but globally the importance of religion is growing, and this is perhaps something that needs to be paid attention to if we think about global development, if you're working on a global field. So those are a couple of things. It's a very good question. I don't really have a kind of thorough answer for you, but I encourage everybody to think also about the changing of social norms and changing of habits. You can also think about how our habits have already changed. Oh yeah, that was the third thing that I wanted to say, that if we connect this now to the kind of ecological reconstruction or ecological rebuilding, it's not just about infrastructure. It's actually perhaps more about our culture and more about our values, what we hold dear, what we strive for, what we think as progress. Do we think that kind of wealth means progress, or do we think that sustainability means progress? Do we want to spend more time with our family or friends? These kind of value shifts will probably affect quite a lot of what the future of work will be, what the future of society will be as well. Then about the B2B technology sales, what will future salesperson need? One thing is of course that there will be more data. I think this is very kind of common already to salespersons that you have kind of more data about customers, about what works, about how different leads go. So I think this is a good example also on using AI as a kind of one tool, or big data as one tool in your job. And then I would say that the high touch tasks will become more important. So face-to-face connection with people. I was last week I was speaking in a print and media seminar, and the speaker before me who had an online printing company said that of course they do Google adverts, etc., and try to kind of gather their customers that way. But actually they noticed that because the cost of Google adverts has gone up, it's more cheap to actually hire a person who goes from customer to customer and talks with them and said, okay, this is what we are offering, and etc. And this was kind of interesting to me. So perhaps at least part of the salesperson's job will also be just door-to-door sales, so to speak. Good. More questions? What? Yes, there's one. Yep. Just a minute.
Okay, you mentioned about the high-touch skills. So what's your opinion that currently many high-touch work is not very well paid financially, and it seems that our current economical system doesn't encourage high-touch work. So how would the change in the future make a change that it becomes more valuable in terms of money and financial systems? Or does it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Any more questions? There's one.
Yeah, I'd like to continue the previous question in terms of that a lot of chatbots is implemented in the customer service, for example. That's, I think, one of the major areas today that they are coming through. And then the other question is about the also that isn't the creativity is the thing that is truly human, that is the most important thing in the future in the work.
Yeah, very good points. About this high-touch skills and how to make kind of high-touch work more valuable, yeah, I don't know. I think that's a that is a very good question, and yeah, well, dealing with a kind of a systemic change. I see that it needs to become more valuable. We need to be willing to pay more about on high touch work, so to speak. But yeah, I don't know where the change will come. If any of you have good ideas, then I would be really interested, and I think our government would also be very interested in that. Then about the chatbots and creativity, yeah, I forgot to mention that the high tech, under the high tech work, they're also listing creativity. So in a sense, I think the high tech is a bit of a misnomer that it's not about technology, it's about complexity and creativity and dealing with messy situations, which does require creativity. That said, there is a lot of work on automating creativity. There's an art critic bot also who makes automatic art critic statements, etc. More of a art project in itself, but there are some kind of things that we have perhaps labeled as creative, making advertising jingles, for example, which might very well be automated. But there's a whole lot of different kind of real creativity skills or tasks that will definitely remain. There's one.
Again, a question from the stream. Here is a mother of a child with Down syndrome that's asking, is there any possibility that maybe technology can help him to easier find job? She's writing about that only a few disabled people have paid jobs at this moment. Is it perhaps a job that doesn't exist today that would be a suitable one for people in this kind of position?
Yeah, I think especially in this case, there is a possibility that technology will be kind of enable disabled people, enable kind of quite a diverse set of people to do different tasks. It also does require kind of shifts in culture and shifts in society. So it's not just about technology, but technology will definitely enable new things. Good. More questions? All right. If not, we do have time also in at the end for questions. So now I'll continue with organizing work, skills, and then we'll move on to something completely different. But first, organizing work. It's simple and complicated at the same time. So if we think about the key change in work in relation to organizing work, we have perhaps been used to this idea of thinking of kind of segmentation of work as that there's people who are kind of employed, people who are entrepreneurs, people who are unemployed, and then kind of people who are out of the workforce. And we have built our system based on this kind of segmentation. But now what we are seeing that, okay, these still do exist, but there's more and more of kind of in-betweeners or project nomads and pensioner freelancers. People get retired, and then because the people live longer, live healthier lives longer, they are still kind of, okay, well, I could do something while I'm retired. We are seeing more and more that perhaps we should think about also the volunteer work, also kind of domestic work. There is this people who have limited ability to work, but also but still are kind of a valuable part of the workforce. So how do we kind of deal with this new segmentation? So and this is one of the key kind of messages in the future work, that old ways of doing things are not going away, and old kind of structures are not necessarily going away, but work is becoming more and more diverse. So work life is becoming more and more diverse. This holds true also to organizations. So old hierarchical organizations aren't going away, but we see also organizations such like this. Any guesses on what this organization does? It's kind of an organization chart or web of commitments. Any guesses in which field this company is working on? You can just shout. Catholic Church. Okay, well, yeah. I haven't heard a Catholic church as a guess before, but that's a good one. Yeah. Any other guesses? EU. Yeah. Well, sometimes feels that way. This is a company. This is a tomato processing plant. So a factory, tomatoes come in, and I don't know, ketchup comes out. I don't know what happens here. Called Morningstar, and it's kind of an organizational chart or web of commitments. Each kind of dot is a person, and each line represents a commitment that person has done or promised to another one. And if you want to change your tasks, you need to renegotiate it with other peoples. And but what I like about this example is that it's a process factory. It's not a kind of a IT company or indeed a Catholic church. But still it kind of works, and it has worked for quite a long time. If you're interested in this kind of this network organizations or holacracies or similar, you can read the book by Lalou, Reinventing Organizations. There's a lot of other examples as well. But I'm not saying that every company should be like this. There are some benefits of this. This can be quite kind of agile, and people can have more freedom in negotiating their tasks. But it also means that there's no boss to complain to. If you have a conflict, it is usually a bit more complex to sort it out because there's no boss. So you need to first try to agree among yourselves, or then bring a third person. And if that doesn't work, there's a committee set up to set. So this needs also a whole different work culture, an organizational culture, these type of organizations. And we indeed have seen that many times these don't work. Many times a hierarchical organization is good, but sometimes these are good. And as a more kind of general trend, the boundaries of organizations are becoming kind of more blurred. So there might be freelancers working in an organization. There might be people working in a lot of different organizations who are also kind of building working as a broker of knowledge or as a kind of a connection point. I mentioned platform cooperatives as well. Platform monopolies, so big companies like Facebook, YouTube, etc., are still kind of the norm. But there have been these signs of platform cooperative, which the idea is that people who are working in for the platform also own the platform. Not a new idea, just brought to the digital world. So, for example, instead of Uber, you might have a green taxi co-op. It does exactly the same thing, but it's owned by the drivers. Which means that then the platform also works as a way to distribute the profits it makes. So it's a kind of a new, well, not a new way. It's an other way of distributing the value that is created by the platforms. If these would become more common, then perhaps the digital economy would be quite different. Then again, thinking through technology. I do have a bias for technology. I'm an engineer by background also. But if you think about what these blockchains and smart contracts might bring, there's an idea of decentralized autonomous organizations where where the idea of organization is kind of simplified as a contract between different actors, not necessarily even people, but different actors, and then the contracts themselves can govern. Contracts can govern themselves because they are basically just code. They are looking that have some kind of criteria being fulfilled, and if it has, then money shifts or something else, and you can kind of build elaborate organizations based on that. Not so far quite successful examples. So there has been a couple of examples of these, for example, in the Ethereum chain, that have had some bugs. So, well, not necessarily bugs, but people don't work as code. So we can find different kind of things that the coder hasn't thought of and exploit that. So, but still a kind of interesting idea. The visions of these go through, for example, instead of a Uber or a green taxi co-op, you would have a set of self-owned, self-driving cars, which you hop in, you pay, and the money goes to the car itself, and then the car takes care of its own maintenance because it can make smart contracts, etc. So this was about organizations. So now about learning, and here we also get to the importance of questioning also the change in our social norms. This is a bit dated picture of the future of learning. This is from 1899. A French artist tried to imagine what the school would be in 2000. And here we see actually the high tech of its time being applied. So some form of mechanization and perhaps there's some electricity. I don't know what's happening with these helmets. But what I like about this picture is that it quite clearly represents the way we used to think about what education is. The teacher is a bit higher than the pupils. The pupils are sitting in line, and the teacher is quite literally pushing book knowledge into the pupils' brains. One pupil is with the crank duty. I don't know if that's a good part of bad. But anyhow, I think why this might seem a bit funny is that our understanding of what learning is has perhaps changed. Although I recently came across this example of a Chinese school where they've installed a face recognition camera to the front, which looks at the pupils. Everybody has its designated seat, so the system will automatically notice if you're not present. It will also track your mood, your facial expression, which is useful data then for the teacher to improve his or her teaching. And there you might ask the question that, okay, how is that then different from this idea of trying to make kind of teaching as efficient as possible? But when we are thinking about lifelong learning, we perhaps need to this kind of picture, that lifelong learning isn't this. It doesn't mean that we will kind of be sitting in neat rows and listening when some person is talking from the front. It's not only that, at least. So if we look at the kind of the lists of what do we need to learn in the future, they usually list a lot of these so-called meta skills. So we need to learn how to learn. So, for example, active learning. We need to understand complex things, or understand complexity. We need to be creative, for example. I like this list by British foundation Nesta, which also lists the kind of the least important skills. They did this is also based on a big data analysis. They did took data from their employment kind of records and looked at what kind of skills are listed in job offerings and what have kind of disappeared. So, for example, night vision. That's not that important anymore. Multi-limb coordination. Well, perhaps that'll come back. I don't know. But it's a good kind of indication also that okay, well, the skills have changed, and even though this might seem kind of a long list of okay, do I really know to do how to do all of these things? Well, we are already good in many of these. I have a bit shorter list, but basically the lists usually have not substance-specific skills, but focus on learning how to learn, but also focus on how to ensure your own well-being. So as work becomes more uncertain and perhaps more stressful, it becomes more and more important to manage your time at the same time as you're flexible, and manage your own well-being. The high-touch skills are here as well, so people skills and empathy, systems thinking, critical thinking. As a futures researcher, I of course want to add also this idea of futures literacy. So if we are in a kind of time of change, it becomes more and more important to understand the change and to also be able to influence it. So futures literacy means that we kind of understand different trends. We can interpret these trends to our own life. We can challenge them. So not everything a futures researcher or some other person says about the future is necessarily true. So you need to challenge also some claims about futures. But then also, in addition to the critical thinking, you need to be creative. So you need to be able to think about alternative futures. What might happen? What do we want to happen? I'll come back to that later. So, continuous learning, life management, in two kind of skills, but what we need. But also, perhaps we need to move from what to why. So not just listing skills and then thinking about how do we kind of gain these skills, but to think about why do we learn? What's the kind of the reason behind it? This is from our Citrus work on lifelong learning, which looks also that the learning should happen at the individual, community, and society level. And of course, there is the reason to learn so you have skills that you need in your job, and therefore the company is more competitive. and the society is more economically sustainable. Then there's also the idea of Bildung or Civistus or general education that we learn for the sake of learning. We want to improve ourselves. But then there's two kind of things that perhaps need more attention in this time. One is the kind of the capacity for improvement, and also the kind of the capacity to rebuild society. So if we indeed need to radically rebuild our infrastructure, radically rethink our lifestyle and reshape our culture, well, it does require new skills. And then there's also this inclusion and well-being. So taking care of your own education, skills, know-how, as well as the education of community is key to ensuring inclusion and well-being. So basically, learning is a way to increase your well-being. All right. So this was about trends, and now we move to more surprising things. So if you have questions about trends, be sure to write them down, because we are moving to possible surprises and surprising possibilities. I mentioned at the beginning that you can think about, try to prepare for the future, so this has been about how to prepare for the future. These are the kind of the trends we are seeing that are changing. And now we are moving more to the novelty and emergence. The reason for this is that many futures researchers say that we are now living in post-normal times. You may have also heard the terms VUCA, so volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, or TUNA, turbulent, uncertain, novelty, and ambiguous. But I like the term post-normal because we are not only living in a kind of a complex times, we are also living in times where there's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of conflict. World may even seem chaotic. So we are living in times where at consumer electronics fair there are robot strippers with CCTV heads, or where we go to the beach to enjoy virtual reality, where things that, the word normal isn't necessarily that useful. So what is normal in these pictures, or indeed what is normal in the internet, for example. It's not a useful concept to think about things, and thus post-normal. So in post-normal times, these ideas of surprises grows more important, and one way to kind of try to tame the complexity and look at surprises is to look at weak signals. A weak signal is something that has happened, but it's not mainstream. But it might kind of indicate something that might happen. So it's a signal of a thing to come, of an emerging issue, of a first symptom of change. So it's not easy to spot weak signals by just looking at, okay, now I'm going to look at weak signals. But instead, this is a useful question. Thinking about what has been surprising or ridiculous or outrageous that you've come across lately. How many of you suffer from loss of concentration sometimes? Yeah. Here's a product for you. These are novice glasses that have a sensor here and two sensors at the back, and they monitor your brain waves. And if they see that you're losing your concentration, they turn black, so you can't see until you focus again. So the company is saying that, okay, you can train your concentration using these, or perhaps you could have your company employees use these to ensure that they are concentrated. So you can see quite a lot of kind of Black Mirror type of scenarios where these might be used wrong. But of course, this is one signal. The idea is then to gather quite a lot of different signals and see that is there a kind of an emerging theme here? Is there a kind of a well, here you could think that is there a kind of a theme of solutions to bad solutions to real problems, for example. Another thing I came across was that the Instagram memers are unionizing. I didn't know that Instagram memer is a job. Apparently it is, and they have found that okay, unions do exist for exactly this reason, that to look after their benefits. So and to have collective bargaining power. So you might think then, okay, well, if this is then happening, does this what would this mean for example labor unions? Can they reinvent themselves, or will there become new unions, for example? I did last year. I looked more deeply into these weak signals, and we published a report in January where there's collected a couple of a whole range of different weak signals, and then interpreted them under these 6 headings. So, for example, one question we perhaps could be asking ourselves now is, what actually is human in a time where we can, in a time of genetic modification, or indeed microbiome modification, so we can modify the bacteria that we have in our gut and skin, and that will affect the way we behave, or it's research, could this be one kind of cure for diabetes, for example? And which then challenges our idea of a human being as kind of a one organisms to a kind of an ecosystem, and brings new questions. Or then if you think about kind of digital world, where there's already quite a lot of data about us. So for Facebook, we are kind of more of a data set than a real person. Or the Chinese government has this social credit system where you have a credit score. You gain credit by doing good deeds, and you lose them by doing bad deeds. It's of course not that transparent what is a good deed and bad deed, and this will have implications for your real life. So, for example, if you don't have a good enough credit score, social credit score, you don't get to board a plane or board a train. There's also a question of who decides in the future how. For example, there's in Germany there's quite a lot of these Reisbürger people. Well, not quite a lot. It's still marginalized. So it's let's say 10,000 people, but in some parts they are more kind of clustered. And these Reisbürger people don't believe in the German government, so they don't kind of think that it's a valid government, and which of course, if there's quite a lot of these people in some region, it's a kind of problem for the regional authorities if they kind of don't have the Reisbürger have their own passports and own police force, etc. So it's an interesting question of what future states are. A useful question is also to think about how, if we think that the future might be something surprising, well, it's not necessarily surprising for a person living in the future. So if we hop to the future, let's say 50 years, and look back, what do we think is surprising in our present day? What will the future generations think that, what were you thinking doing that? All right. So how can technology be misused? I also talked a little bit about how do we do things in the future, so we can grow leather type material using mushrooms, or we can modify yeast to produce silk. This all exists already. So the very way we kind of produce things might be changing. So the next thing after digitalization might be this biologization. Well, but there's been quite a lot of talk about biotech before as well, but things are happening quite quickly in synthetic biology at the moment. So you can find more from our webpage. But the thing when you start looking at weak signals, this is a good motto by futurist Jim Dager, said that any useful idea about futures should, at least at first, appear to be ridiculous. Because ridiculous ideas are ones that broaden our thinking about futures. He has also said that not all ridiculous ideas are useful. So you can think about what surprising signs of change have you noticed. But I think we'll move on. We'll save this also to the last part. So I still have a couple of words about the kind of the planning the future, or visioning the future. If we think about, we have megatrends, which say that these types of things are changing. We have weak signals which try to broaden our thinking about futures. Then the question is, so what? What will we do? And then there we will get to the visioning of better futures. So coming back to the images of futures, here's a kind of a more on the societal level image of the future that we've perhaps had. We could say that in Finland we have had this image of the middle class's promise that has pushed us forward and defined what we see as progress. So the idea of getting a degree, starting a family, doing a long career, and basically consuming yourself to happiness. And then if we remind ourselves of the megatrends of ecological crisis, of the changes in work, suddenly this kind of image of the future isn't kind of providing answers to us. What should we do? This isn't working, and we don't have a kind of an alternative. So we see just kind of static when we are looking into the TV of the future. So future looks uncertain. So how to alleviate this uncertainty? We have a HAT method for doing this. There are two questions that you should ask. The first is when you're confronted with a kind of a trend or claim about future. The first is how big of a change does this require from us? You could put on a tinfoil hat and say that, okay, well, this will be a radical change. Everything that we have believed in will be gone. Or you can put on a paper bag and say, well, these kind of big changes, well, there's always some future hippie who says that this and this will change. It doesn't usually come to Finland. We are kind of removed from changes. Another question is that do we see more threats or opportunities in this change? You can say that okay, well, actually, there's quite a lot of opportunities here, and if there are some threats, well, technology will take care of them. We can solve them. Or then you can say that okay, well, actually, the future looks pretty frightening. and I see more threats here, and it would be fantastic if I could just move to some mythical past and kind of be there where everything used to be great. So of course you get a kind of a consultant type of quadrants here, where you can think about where would you be in terms of different changes about future. How do you feel about climate change or aging or urbanization, or indeed the kind of changes in work? We have looked at how kind of societal visions are positioned here. What kind of societal visions do we have? Well, usually the societal visions that we have, they don't see that much of they don't describe that much of a change. Also, the visions we have about future work coming from societal actors are usually here that oh well, there's a incremental change, a little bit threats and a little bit opportunities. But then we've seen that okay, we can create these pictures of doom and gloom, and indeed I would say that we are now having a boom of dystopias. We have visions that promote fear and threat, and are used to for different purposes. There is indeed space for progressive visions. It's still okay to believe in future. I'm sometimes asked that do we have any hope given all these megatrends? And I read a blog by Finnish futures researcher Minna Santaoja, who wrote beautifully that there is no hope for things to remain as they are. We can't kind of stay where we are, but there is hope for a better future. It will be different, but it can be better. And if you think about the shift to, for example, ecologically sustainable world, there's quite a lot of things that could be better. So, of course, we have a vision called the next era of well-being, which starts from the idea that well, we should not kid ourselves that the situation is not challenging, but it's not impossible. You can read more at nextera.global. I'd like to end with this quotation. Well, almost end with this quotation by another futurist, Fred Pollack, who has said that he made this wrote this book called The Image of the Future in the 50s and 60s, looking at the images of different Western societies. And his kind of conclusion was that the societies kind of flourish and collapse in line with the ability to renew the image of the future. So when the society loses its ability to renew its image of the future, so thinking about what would be the kind of the next step, then the society kind of collapses. But he does end on a positive note, that even though there perhaps has been a kind of a lack of new images of future, new ideas of what progress means for us, we do have the capacity to dream finer dreams than we have ever succeeded in dreaming. And if you want to dream finer dreams and make visions in practice, we have collected a Future Makers Toolbox, which is a collection of different futures methods, as well as links to other guides to futures thinking, which you can then check out. All right, good. Now we have about 10 minutes for discussion on, well, I have two questions for you. What was interesting, or what do you remember? And what questions emerge? And then we'll have time for questions. So, 10-minute discussion. Time for questions and comments. What were you discussing, or what do you want to still ask? This one.
Hello. I just have I don't know, do you want it to consider it as a comment or you consider it as a question? There was one slide that you were talking about disagreement, and then how do you see in the future like this kind of black and white television that you showed us, and how is the disagreement makes difference? From my point of view, that I see currently, I really feel that at least many of the points are not going to be seen in more international point of view. It's just like nations point of view, and it would be, because I am the kind of person that usually have a disagreement in every meeting, almost, and then I think that it reached that they just see another perspective, that it's really important that you don't see it. And I think your idea about these televisions and how do you see the future, I think it's mainly depends on the policy, and then policy is main important in the world, main important game changer. And then another one is like, I don't know, it was so general a slide from my point of view. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, really good points. I'll come back to those. Other questions? This one.
Again, from the stream, there is a question. Why are we expected to accept rising levels of ignorance in the chaotic working environment while trying to also keep focus on well-being of the individual? Less is more doesn't mean ignorance, in my opinion, this person writes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, good. Very good. Two on the same line. Other questions? Or perhaps well, there was one.
Okay, sorry. What we discussed here was mostly about like what are we doing for being more sustainable, and how we have this point of view of like small actors in local can affect these megatrends. And for example, she had the vision that the megatrend is pointing to a more disappointed future where we are not going for this sustainability, that actually that time passed during the 70s. Sorry if I didn't remember. But in my point of view, maybe the megatrends, like politicians or like these public figures, are now pointing to that direction. But locally, there is a lot of things happening that maybe are pushing these megatrends to change. But is it like, how do you see this connection, especially related with the presentation slide when you were talking about this tomato producing thing?
Yep.
That the connections were like negotiated, and then how, this connection between local and megatrend.
Yeah, all right, very good. I'll start with the disagreements and ignorance points. My point is not that disagreements would be bad, or that this conflict would necessarily be a bad thing. My point is that we are not kind of used to dealing with them, especially when thinking about futures. We often think that people kind of agree and are nice and we can work together. And this is not the case, of course. And we need to pay more attention to this. And what this means in practice, well, at least in futures research practice, is that we need to think about the kind of the trends, the changes that are happening, and the connections between these, and to look where are the tensions. For example, you might say that there's a tension between the amount of data and the value of privacy. So we value privacy more at the same time that we have data, private data on company servers. So there's a tension, and then you can think about, okay, how will this tension be solved? And this is interesting for future. That if we focus on the tensions and how will the tensions play out, then we have a better understanding of possible futures, perhaps. For example, the privacy versus data tension, you can look at the US, for example, where the companies then just own the data, and the privacy concerns are kind of not that important, or then a bit similar in China, but the government owns the data. So one kind of trend is dominant and absorbs the other. This is one possible outcome. Or then you can look at Europe and think about GDPR and think about that we own our data, etc., which is kind of a synthesis that there are these two trends colliding, and then there's a synthesis, a new direction that we didn't perhaps see coming. Or then the tension might just kind of be there. I don't know about the data and privacy, but we see these kind of unsolvable tensions, such as Brexit or the political situation in the US in general, that tension will be there at least for quite a while. There's a kind of a tear in the fabric of society. So looking at these tensions and focusing on the dissent is one thing when thinking about possible futures. The other is to increase diversity and many voices when we are thinking about preferred futures. Finland is quite a leader in foresight, also in public foresight. We have a long tradition, and it's well kind of instituted and well kind of well placed also in public decision making. But it's still, we kind of have a foresight bubble that it's not that. We need more kind of inclusion in the discussion about futures. That also requires kind of increase in futures literacy. So the kind of the rising levels of ignorance, and I would say that it's in post-normal times it is more important to kind of say what is your preferred future, but also be ready to listen to what others are saying is the preferred future, and have a kind of a constructive dialogue about it. I know it's hard to sometimes have a constructive dialogue about it, but here's a time for another Citra advert. We developed this time-out dialogue method with dialogue gurus in Finland, which you can also find in our website, which basically has tips for having a constructive dialogue on difficult issues. It's a very kind of step-by-step guide. Then about sustainability and small local actors versus megatrends. There are interesting kind of examples of this the small action. For example, a project called Seeds of the Good Anthropocene, which collects different examples of grassroots local action trying to create a better, more sustainable future, a good Anthropocene, so to speak. And I think these are interesting in that the idea is to both kind of disseminate these examples and scale them so the small local actions could together become something bigger, taking into account, of course, the different contexts. So this is one way to think about the kind of the megatrends seem so inevitable and huge, but then kind of the accumulation of small actions can actually shift them. Then another way to think about them is also to, well, if we try to kind of change them, are we in the same at the same time trying to kind of build a more future-proof life for ourselves? Are we also trying to adapt to them? And often these go hand in hand. So it's not kind of it's not useless to try to save the world, and it will have more immediate benefits as well, and not just kind of try to mitigate climate change, etc. Also, a thing I've been working on recently, and we started a project on this, is increasing, well, democratizing the futures discussion and broadening it by two ways. One is the increasing the inclusion, so having more voices, but the other is to introduce more preferred futures or even utopias into societal discussion. Utopia has a kind of a it's not that widely used in societal discussion at the moment, but dystopias are. So we have a kind of a dystopia boom and not that many utopias. And we hope to kind of bring more utopias also to the discussion, because we need images of preferred futures and we need discussion about better futures, because those will probably better kind of encourage us to also act, because dystopias can be quite kind of they might lead to apathy, for example. Good. I hope I answered some of the questions. Any more questions? What do you want to ask, or do you want to share something that you discussed with your pair? Yep. Well, the mic.
Just a comment, because we were discussing exactly this pessimism and optimism about future. So I myself think that you're right, that we should have more positive images, because we all are in depression. That machines will take our job, climate change, and everything. But maybe you can comment something else about this optimism.
Yeah. Well, we hope to bring more hope to the discussion, and a couple of good kind of terms and books, for example, on radical hope, and there's also a good Finnish term called sisu, which is kind of hope against all odds, and yeah, hope even in November. So I think that's one. There's a question.
Comment on the optimism. It's kind of hard because we have the algorithms that feed on fear. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like these algorithms are actually fighting against the human nature by providing us news that are basically just fear-based. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, optimism doesn't sell the news. So we have to, like, I think I saw a study where Facebook is dominated by the news outlets that use these fear-mongering news as a driver for growth, and it's kind of like I think we have to kind of consider those changes. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like we would have to fight against the algorithm. So it is man versus the machines in a way already.
Yeah, that's a very good point. This one.
What did you mean by religion?
All right. And then there was one question like that.
Just a comment regarding the fear. I think fear is not man versus machine, but it's evolutionary in our biology that we are more fear prone. That's how we have survived. So that's why we hate changes anyway in the first place.
All right, good. So on fear and algorithms, yeah, I agree. Fear is a kind of a biological reaction. There's also research done that so-called positive feelings such as joy and love, etc., are needed for innovation and discovery and these kind of things. So if we want to create something new, we need something else than fear. And then about the kind of the algorithms, the Finnish philosopher Frank Marttela said that in this time we need to be curators of our own social media. So we can choose what things to share. That doesn't affect necessarily the Facebook algorithms. So we also need kind of regulation, we need alternatives, etc. For that. So it's not just about the individual action, but that is something we can start doing right away. Think about what is the message we want to kind of share, and I'm not saying that only share nice things, because we do need the conflict, we do need the disagreement, but think about what kind of news media you are curating in your social media. Then about religion, I've meant that in globally the importance of religion is on the rise, be it Islam or be it in the US especially fundamental Christianity, etc. So these kind of things are affecting, for example, politics, etc. globally. We are not seeing that so much in Finland. But yeah, that was what I meant by that. Good. There's one.
Hello, Juha. I have a couple comments and maybe question. The question is, I think, that how we can change the public speaking and collaboration to ask ourselves how to make the utopia back to the core again, because the more we are talking, the human history is full of examples where the public discussion has changed from utopias to dystopias, and then those societies has been collapsed. And I think that's the biggest challenge for us as well. And then it's really interesting phenomena ongoing, for example, in religious, that actually like well-being and green movement and these kind of things are rising to be like almost like religious as well. There are similar kind of phenomena. So how we can somehow utilize that in positive way?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I don't have an answer how to bring utopias back to the societal discussion. I see that they are making a small comeback now, but perhaps what we need to do is utopias do have quite a lot of baggage. So there are examples of authoritarian utopias and utopias as a way to kind of colonize futures. And what I mean by utopia is utopia as a kind of a method for critical thinking about the current societal things, societal situation, but also as a way to kind of think about alternative futures and think about alternative preferable futures. So, but not necessarily something we will achieve. Another kind of possible route could be to show that there are many utopias that we have actually achieved to some degree. The whole Nordic welfare state is well, I think it's still a kind of utopia in some places. Our kind of education system in Finland used to be utopia. But now we need to kind of radicalize the utopias, because now it's used like if a politician says that we could have a four-day work week, and that's kind of a utopia. Whereas I know people who have 4-day work weeks, and so it's kind of incremental change rather than a more radical change that the utopia should be. Yeah. Hope I answered that. All right. More comments or questions? So if you want to read more about Megatrends, weak signals, our vision about the timeout dialogue method, about circular economy or data economy, etc., you can find that all in our website. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask privately, I'll still be here after this. But if no further comments, so I thank you for your attention and good questions. This was a learning experience also for me.